Welcome to the Gateway, broadcasting live from the edge of the Mojave where the strange slips through the cracks. We are live on United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM. And I'm sorry, you guys, I'm kind of losing my voice tonight. I don't know what's going on. I feel like I'm catching a crud or something. So I'm going to have this raspy Las Vegas voice for you guys. I hope you like it. So I'm your host. I'm C.L. Thomas. You guys all know that. Tonight we're joined by demonologist and paranormal investigator James Annitto. He's a dear friend of mine, and I'm so excited that he is coming back on the scene. I can't wait to get him on here. But before we get into that, you've been listening to Into the Night with Sean Kelly and his discussion on why do we need magic in our lives. If you missed it, check him out on Sundays as well. He's on at 5 p.m. Pacific. So this Sunday, he asked me to join him. I might be doing a live spirit art reading. So if you're interested in kind of what spirit art is, come on that show. I'm going to come on there and do a live reading. So you'll see what that's all about. So if I'm up for it, I'll be there. Stay tuned. It's currently 98 degrees here in the Mojave. It's a little warm, but the temperature is going to drop sometime later this week. There's always something going on around Vegas. Whether it's one of those places where we don't say, what show are we going to in the next couple months, right? We say it every night. What show are we going tonight? There's always something going on. So tonight, I'm so excited about this. On the Strip, we are getting a piece of the Burning Man. That's right. A decommissioned jumbo jet that was a party venue at the Burning Man Festival is being relocated here to Vegas at Area 15, just off the Strip. The gutted Boeing, I think it's a 747, is soon to be transformed into our newest nightlife venue. I can't believe it. I can't wait to see this thing. So for those that don't know, Area 15 is this giant area just outside of the Las Vegas Strip that houses the Meow Wolf's Mega Mart is in there, as well as some other giant permanent art installations. It's a neat place. But I can't wait to see what they do with this Burning Man plane. It's going to be exciting. So among other news, I want to especially thank the marketing team with the Queen Mary. They hosted me over the weekend to investigate their ship, and wow, what an experience. It was just me and another guy that he kind of have taken me around to all the places that a person normally wouldn't get to see, and I had nothing but my digital recorder and got to walk around the ship and just experience that. It was pretty amazing. The place really is haunted. I caught a lot of things just in that 4-hour span that I was on that ship. But anyhow, I'll post those later this week so you guys can see and hear what I'm talking about. I want to get into our topic tonight. We're joined by demonologist and paranormal investigator James Annitto. He has been actively investigating the paranormal since 2004. He's been in it a long time. What I like about him is he brings this really unique analytical thinking and psychological insight to it, as well as a spiritual understanding, which, if you caught my show tonight with Tim Shaw, we talked a little bit about the spiritual understanding of this work. Tonight, he will share his insight on the psychological dimensions of the paranormal. And let me get him on here. Hi,
Hello,
James.
how you doing?
Welcome back to the show.
Yes, thank you. I believe I was one of your first guests when you first started this, and now I'm here again many years later.
This is true. You've been a guest for me quite a few times now.
I have, I'm very appreciative of that, and our friendship. We got to go to Romania together, and you've been a great friend and a great person to delve more into deep topics on your show.
I really value your work and your insight on a lot of different things. Um, you
Appreciate
kind
that.
of you kind of disappeared a little bit in the paranormal, but now you're back. And on top of that, you have a really big announcement.
Hmm.
Would you like to talk about where'd you go and what's your big announcement?
Well, if you've ever followed me in my life in this field, for most people that know me, I'm an individual that when goes through hard times. We're people. We have daily lives. We have daily trials and tribulations, and so I like to disappear because I'm not a very talkative person in the sense of my emotions. I grew up with a very traumatic history, and in some form or fashion. Um, Raised myself. So, when I'm going through a dark time and or need self reflection or introspection, I tend to just run away and hide in a little burrow and kind of come out when winter's over as a bear, a hibernation. So that's basically what had happened. I made some poor decisions in my life, and dealing with the work that I do specifically, which is negative hauntings and consulting people regarding these hauntings. I needed to take a break and take time for myself. But first and foremost, it was really my family as well. I needed to focus on my two children, my girlfriend, who I was taking a lot of time away from by traveling, doing podcast, traveling, doing lectures or speaking engagements or investigations. So, I really had to step back and create time for my kids, my family, and that's still a priority. As I like to say, I'm not fully back. I am like dipping my toes in. But it's more so I'm dipping my toes in because I do have a huge announcement, actually, two announcements, surprisingly for you. But so that's one of the biggest reasons, a lot of my years, since 2004, um, so a very long time. But I've been have been asked to for years to kind of put my mind to paper, and I've always tried and hesitated. There was a time that I was writing a book with a co-writer, or maybe a ghostwriter, and so to say. But I, we were at the finish line, and there was just a break between a friendship, and as in the paranormal drama occurred, so the book went wayside, and all those writings that this person had went with them, and it was never released. So this past basically 10 months I've been away, um, from social media and the paranormal. I really have gotten a couple things over the finish line, one more so than the other. But I've really been able to just sit down while doing my schoolwork because I have a career. I'm a master's program for my psychology degree. I have two kids, so my life is pretty daunting. But
Two
yeah, so
small, two babies, nonetheless.
yeah, 9-year-old and a 3-year-old is a craziness. But so yeah, so my announcement is not only do I have one book coming out, I have two books coming out. One book by the end of 2025, which of course the show is called base. The show is what the base is called on, the psychological dimensions of the paranormal, which is going to be coming out end of 2025, and then in 2026 I will have a book coming out called The History of Demonology. The forward for the first book I just discussed, coming out in 2025, is the forward is by Ron Yacovetti, a very brilliant mind in this field, and somebody that I love and adore very much so. And then the history of demonology, the forward is by Keith Johnson, who is a
Oh,
renowned
nice.
demonologist. So yeah, it's crazy. I never thought I was going to be able to push two books out. The second one is in rough draft phase. It's basically all written beside the forward from Keith, but he did agree to write it. And then the psychological dimensions of the paranormal is basically sitting and waiting. I'm possibly working with the publisher through Ron, but if that doesn't go through by my timeline, I will self-publish it as of right now. And I'm looking at towards the end October, but I'm going to give it till end of 2025. But it definitely will be out this year.
Well, congratulations, James. How do you manage to do all of this stuff with two young kids at home and
Trust me, like when I'm doing my master's schoolwork, I have a couple nights a week set towards my class studies. So if I get done with classwork early, then I will. Then I was putting mine towards the book, or, I won't lie. A very I'm a squirrel when it comes to research, right? So I'll research one thing, and then something will catch my eye, and then I'll jump down that rabbit hole, or follow that nut. And but I also am a big gamer too, so it's like I had to take a lot of what I really wanted to research to focus on these two books. The demonology one, I'm, most people look at me as a demonologist, well respected in regards to some people. I guess some people hate me, but a lot of people respect me in the demonology realm. So that book was easy because I are very well intertwined with the history, and there are other books out there like it, but I think my book is a little bit different. It hits a little bit earlier in ancient times compared and into modern times, and has a little bit of influence of my experiences, as well. Part of the psychology book that I'm writing, that's going to be out in 2025. So it has a mixture of things, but it is really in nuance the history of demonology. So that book was much easier. The psychology one, like I said, I'm in my master's program. I do have a bachelor's degree in psychology, so that required a lot of research. But really, what kind of pushed it forward is that I was doing a descriptive research on for my class. That was a two-part course, and we had to do actual research. And our population pool was our class. So I actually do have a descriptive research out there as well, a survey study um, that was going to coincide with this book, but it's snail speed. I went from like 10 people to 40 people, but I need a couple hundred, maybe. I really want over 100 people. And I want an equal amount of gender. Yeah, I want equal male, equal female, so it's not skewed in relations when the quantitative research comes out. I like the quantitative number of data. So I want to have an equal measure of population when it comes to gender. But so I do actually have a descriptive research out right now. The link's on my Facebook. If you want to take the survey, it takes about 25 minutes. And really, what the hypothesis was based on, and it's not, some people have said, well, you're saying people that believe in the paranormal stupid. No, it's based on research like Tobac's paranormal belief scale, and other things that have been researched through descriptive research, and then of course analyzed further, where critical thinking or lack of critical thinking might have a set of belief towards the paranormal, and then also certain personality types might have a certain relation to paranormal belief. It's just a study. I'm not trying to stigmatize anybody. I just find it fascinating. I really just trying to dig deeper to see if it's uh if it's something that has a correlation, because if it does, it's something that we can just dig deeper in. And I
Mhm.
think that with me, in my paranormal life, I've always tried to look through multiple different lenses. You said I'm an analytical thinker, but I'm also a critical thinker. So I analyze things, but I also want to have a standard of fact or empirical nature to it. And if I can't find that, at least I can come closest to the closest thing I can to the pinpoint of where I can accurately say, okay, it could be this or that, or just to to know what's the to know about it. Like, I don't know what it is, but I can accurately say I don't know.
Mhm.
And that's me. And so this book had a connection to that, but I separated them. And I think people will like it, but I think some people will dislike it because they will probably think that it's stigmatizing them, but it's not. That really, what this book does is it actually walks a narrow line between uh, skepticism and belief. It doesn't pick one or the other. It gives a narrow line of current research through neuroscience, psychology. You can even say chronobiology in it. It looks through those realms, but it also factors that, a lot of these things that people experience, you can't throw out the window either. Because as somebody myself, I've had experiences. I believe, and I've noted this on live television. I've noted this on podcast. I've come across things that modern science can't explain. What I would call a demon. So I'm not stigmatizing it. I'm just opening a lane for people to look through a different lens, because I think when you're researching or investigating the paranormal, then you really need to look at it through multiple lenses. It's not good to just be set in one way, because that's when you become very subjective regarding the
Right.
field.
So, psychology really isn't the first thing people think of, though, when they go investigating, especially when you're just out on a Friday night to have a paranormal experience with these Friday night events that they have all over the country.
Yeah.
How do you see the mind shaping paranormal experiences?
Oh well, that's a good question, because in this book, I actually have a lot of famous hauntings or documented cases. Some cases probably nobody in this western part of the world in the United States know about. Like I have Borley Rectory in England, often called the most haunted house in Britain. It was filled of decades of reports: phantom nuns, mysterious writings on walls, unexplained footsteps. Then I also have the Amityville Horror House, which really, if you think about it, is what shaped the imagination of haunted houses in pop culture. It really was. And then I also have cases from Japan, like Himeji Castle, the haunting of Himeji Castle, with a Kokyu, which was an enduring ghostly legend. So, what one thing that is fascinating about the paranormal in a global scale, and not just a cultural sense, because each culture has a different point of view, but they're very similar, and it seems like there's a universal human experience to it. And that's what's fascinating about this book and interpreting it when people experience the paranormal. One of the things that I like to say is um, the pineal gland, right, which was once thought to be a dead gland, but in the 50s, I believe 1953, could be 1950, it was sometime in the 1950s, they found out the gland actually releases melatonin. And one of the funniest things about that gland is it was always said to be the third eye. And so it makes sense, right? When people are mediums or psychics or clairvoyant, clairsentient, they get comfortable, right? They meditate, or they go in a trance like state. And when you're in rest like state, you release melatonin. And
Mhm.
one of the craziest things too is, depending on what the time, if you're a weekend warrior or a nighttime warrior, most people are on a 24-hour cycle, right? And in chronobiology, the circadian rhythm, most people have the same circadian rhythm unless they change it through their biological imprint or their psychological imprint. So most of the time, for most people, at 10 p.m., melatonin is released right away, regardless. Melatonin is released. Before that, your temperature changes. It gets higher. So your body is already effectively changing in certain circumstances without your control. Especially if you're on the same pattern every day, and your body becomes accustomed to it. So it's fascinating. So if I'm investigating at a location at 10 p.m. at night, melatonin's kicking in. I'm coming in a restful state. So maybe that restful state is maybe awakening me to a spiritual realm, or maybe it's awakening me to be more subjective, and as well take a lot of the myths and legends that I've heard about this location, and then the mind comes into play. Or as much as Jungian theory, Carl Jung, a lot of his research is looked at as philosophical or anecdotal, because really there was no empirical evidence to it. But one of the things that he looked at was the collective unconscious, right?
Mhm.
And what's fascinating about that is that we genes are inherited, right? So traumas inherited. All these things are inherited at a global scale through human nature. Especially if you look at the evolutionary evolution of humans, if you believe in that. I was a Darwinist when I was growing up as a kid. I wasn't religious at all, but it's fascinating to see that now Carl Jung, back then, talked about the collective unconsciousness. We have started to peel back on like genetic memory and how trauma and behaviors can be passed along through
Mhm.
DNA. So maybe a lot of what people experience, and this is a what if, I'm not saying I believe in this fully, but it's a lens, right? It's a lens that we have to dissect to understand the circumstances, to say, well, maybe it's preconceived notion that there is something there because I heard it. So my body becomes at play, and my psyche imprints or projects things there. And well, people will say, well, what about a group situation where there's shared hallucinations, there's hysteria? We talk about
Mm.
hysteria. Look at the Salem witch trials, the European Inquisition. So there have been a lot of
Or most
play by
recent, the COVID ordeal.
the
It was.
COVID idea as well, right? That
Mhm.
was, which wasn't paranormal, but that was mass hysteria.
Mhm.
So we look at that, and we can at least take an inkling of that and say, well, that could connect to the paranormal. And once again, I'm speaking openly, right? So for your listeners or people that are thinking about, well, this guy doesn't believe in it. Well, actually, I truly do believe in it, but how much of it is the human? And I look at it like that. The most famous paradox is what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? So
Well,
my paradox to generate to you, what came first, the human or the haunting, right?
well, as a demonologist, how do you? What is the human element of a haunting um, with a demonic infestation with this?
Well, yeah. So that's actually a great point. Well, for one, cultural impact. What is their religion? What is their spirituality? What do they believe in? What have been they nurtured to since at an early age? A prime example of demonic possession and the possibility of cultural impact is Anneliese Michel in Germany. She died of malnutrition because of numerous exorcisms, even though it was clearly defined that she had psychosis issues, or she had other physical issues such as epilepsy. So they disregarded that, and they continued the exorcisms. And I'm not saying Annalise Mikel wasn't possessed. I have a connection to that case. That was supposed to be Hostage to the Devil Part 2. And I do really truly believe that there was something at play. But how much was at play compared to the psychology of it? Was that reinforcing what was at play and making it a lot worse because something was afflicting her, but all these other things that were not being looked at that point in time during these exorcisms, because there was no medical team involved at that point in time in that age in Germany, that she wouldn't have maybe died if they were handling those things. Like one of the things as demonologists or even an exorcist is I'm not an exorcist, but what exorcists would say is I would tell people that are being afflicted with something spiritual to then go see a therapist, because there is going to be post-traumatic stress disorder or other traumatic
Mhm.
things that might generate from them. So it really does go hand in hand. So like why I believe psychology has an impact on demonology is because psychology helps us understand why people see what they see or believe what they believe. Also, for example, in states of grief or trauma, the mind is more prone to sensing presences or hearing voices. Neurological phenomena like sleep paralysis can mimic obsession or a haunting. But as well as important, psychology doesn't always explain everything away. Sometimes, even when we account for cognitive bias or hallucinations, there remains a core of the experience that feels beyond us, that something more is where the paranormal still has its mystery. So there's still a mystery in a possession, right? There's still mystery in a demonic haunting. But what level of it is the psychological realm of it? Because I will tell you, a lot of my cases that I can remember, and I've had lots of cases, so it's hard to remember all of them, but a lot of them have stemmed from trauma or grief, something that has impacted them in their life, or wrong place, wrong time, hanging around the wrong crowd.
Right.
Impact. environmental impacts in their life that created this predicament. So there is always something psychological at play, and that once again, what came first, the haunting or the human? It tends to always lead towards the human was first, and then something of a haunting or a demonic infestation stemmed from that. So it's great to understand the psychology of it, because when you're helping people, which is what I primarily do, I need to know what the cause and effect is. Yeah, because if I don't know what the cause and effect is, how am I going to end this repeated cycle? Sometimes I don't have to. Sometimes I can do what I have to do, consult them, do a ritual such as a house cleansing or a deliverance, something that might be psychosomatic, but or like a placebo, but sometimes it works. And if it's true and it does really work, which I am a believer of God, I like to more so. I'm an agnostic theist, but nowadays, but I do believe in God. I can't really necessarily explain God. I can get into theological debate and talk about it and give different opinions about it. But I do believe something exists that's a higher power, and I do think that it's something that mediates through us, and we can help people through that. But also, if it's a placebo, these things don't hurt as well, but you still need to understand the cause and effect to it.
Right.
Because if I just go and say humdy humdy hum, your house is blessed, but they're not getting over the situation that really kind of kickstarted this, then they're just going to revert back to that same issue.
Do you think, with the cases that you've had, that people are claiming demonic activity, do you think that demons and humans, with all of that you just said, are a, how should I ask it? Do you think that they're a required dichotomy, or is that relationship more like a nonce than we usually imagine?
So what you're asking, the connection between demons and humans,
Yeah.
the
Do you think?
differences?
Yeah. Well, kinda. Do you think that it just comes hand in hand in our paranormal world and with the nature of humanity to begin?
Well,
Like, I have lots of books on the idea of demons. It goes all the way through history. Does it
yeah.
come hand in hand?
Well, in my history of demonology book, actually goes to the ancient roots.
Yeah.
So in Mesopotamia, Samaria, and all that stuff, Babylon.
Like,
Uh,
do demons have to exist in like, does there have to be this battle between good versus evil?
well, at first, it wasn't necessarily a battle versus good versus evil in humanity, right? It kind of catapulted that towards Greek philosophy and Greek mythology. Epicurus created the theodicies, which is the standard way of saying good versus evil. So really good versus evil was kind of an underlying nature to what people believed in ancient times, right? So 3,000 years ago, or even longer than that now, but Mesopotamian times, they believed that demons could be good or bad, right? They're gods like Pazuzu. You could pray to him or create ritual for him to protect you, but he could also be pestilence, right? He could also bring famine. So it was different back then until about Greek times, where like I said, theodicies came into play, where good versus evil. But really, what catapulted more than the good versus evil from Greek philosophy was Roman mythology, and then into Christianity, right, or Judaism, because Abrahamic religions is really kind of what took the word daemon, which was a Greek word for like but middle being, which so they were overseers between the gods and humans, and they weren't necessarily good or bad. But when Christianity took the word daemon, or daemon, which was in Roman, it became demon. Then it became a good versus evil thing. Like demons were fallen angels that fell from the graces of God because of free will, followed Lucifer, and they were evil, right? Because they went against God. So a lot of that doesn't come into much later in time in humanity. Yeah, I still find fascinating if maybe it does go further back. We found a temple in Turkey 12,000 years ago, humans are actually building temples while we thought they were living in caves or huts and stuff like that, barely building. But we found a temple 12,000 that was built 12,000 years ago, which is probably, I think, the the earliest temple we found now. But if we've predated ourselves now, it used to be 10,000 years for a very long time in the early 80s, 90s. Now we know our human our human Homo sapiens are 200 nearly 250,000 years old, right? So
Mhm.
we have still a lot to discover about the spirituality or belief systems of a lot of these precursors, our forefathers that came way before us. And I will believe that there are probably differences, but what's funny is a lot of the similarities between mythoses, between cultures that didn't, you would think that would have no connection, but had similar building capabilities, similar belief systems, maybe once again of human nature when we spread out from Africa. um, and when maybe that genetic in us of something spiritual was already in us. And that's why there's a branch of neuroscience or theology called neurotheology, and it looks at how faith interacts with neurotransmitters. So when you have faith or think of something, there are parts of our brain that do fire off, and it's fascinating. So maybe it's already intertwined within us. Like I said, I believe in God, but what level of it to now is genetically and psychologically reinforced in us. Like for a long time in psychology, it was nature versus nurture. Now it's nature
Mhm.
and nurture, right?
Yeah.
We know nature fundamentally is a creation aspect of us, but we know nurture is as well, and they work hand in hand. For a long time, mental health didn't it wasn't said to impact physical health. Now we
Right.
know the brain and the health of the brain has a lot to deal with our physical health. So things have changed. But what's fascinating is I feel about psychology or even neuroscience and the paranormal is people that have NDEs. There was an amazing study that's in my book that they took people. They did a study of people, and each person that experienced it had very similar experiences, like almost like scarily crazy, very similar experiences. So is that a spiritual thing, or is that because it's something already wired within our brain and who we are to experience that before death? So that's the interesting thing of this book, and why it kind of makes you think. I'm not trying to make somebody a skeptic or somebody a believer. I'm trying to have somebody walk that narrow bridge with me and say, well, it could be that, it could be this. And I want people to start being less subjective and more objective. There's too
Mhm.
many people that are subjective in this field, and like I love books like yours that tell their stories, but I think that a lot of paranormal literature or even um, television out there is it makes it so spooky entertainment is a good way to
Yeah.
say it, or it tries to debunk it.
There's a difference
Yeah.
between real study and scientific approach versus entertainment.
Yeah, and on television, there's not really that much scientific approach.
Yeah.
You see these bell. I laugh about it because my main career over the last decade, a little over a decade now, actually, is I've been in the construction field. I'm a mechanical trade by definition. I have a mechanical license, so for that, what that means, I work in the HVAC field, but I also work for a plumbing company and electrical company. I've been around it for most of my life, the past 10 years. And so I know a lot of these tools that are used in the field are just bells and whistles, unfortunately. Like an EMF meter is the funniest thing I've seen people to try to detect ghosts with, because even though I do it at events because it's bells and whistles, people are there to have a good time. It's entertainment, right? I
Right.
do try to teach and say, hey, you have to be careful with this thing. But an EMF meter, an electrician would use for a GFI, like, which is your plug, they would use it for a split second to see if there's live power there, and then they shut it off. Because what people don't understand is electricity current is flowing throughout the whole ethos. We give off electricity. We send off electric signals when we enter a room. If I'm 98 degrees and a room 68 degrees, we create static electricity, which which can set off an EMF detector. So a lot of these tools that are used on these television programs are just for the bells and whistles. It makes it look cool for something to
Right.
gravitate towards, and people make a hell of a lot of money off of it. Don't get me wrong, and I like some of them, but I'm a simple guy. I still like analog stuff. I try to use a tape recorder, a camera, flashlight. The big bells on doors. Like if you want to go friggin' Harry Price style over here, like I'm a simple kind of is as person. I do love technology. My first love was technology. I have a associates in computer programming, and I have a CCNA, which is a Cisco Certification Network Associate. When I was in high school, because I went to Votech, I love technology, and but I know a lot about it, and I laugh about it as well. How it's used in the paranormal.
What's always got me about the EMF detectors is you ever watch the videos where you see it, the lights flashing on it, but then they're recording it with their cell phone, and it's like, guys, your cell phone sets that off.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen those videos and you're just like, oh,
Well, yeah, because it's getting it's an antenna signal, so it's still it's in the EMF wave pool, like so it's like when you it's what do you think a radio signal is? It's electricity, so it's bouncing from an antenna to a receiver, and that's how it travels. So yeah, of course it's going to set off that. A EMF meter can be used. Don't get me wrong, because if you're investigating a house and people are claiming to be sick or having experiences, high EMF can get you sick, can lead to mental health issues or even physical issues. So it is good to use it in spurts to check out a breaker box, to check out faulty wiring in those split seconds. And that's what a lot of what I do. I check levels of floor. I'll bring a level in. I'll check if the floor is level so they're not getting equilibrium issues. I'll check the EMF to see if they're not getting sick or getting headaches or hallucinations from it. Those are what those tools are good for. Video cameras are great because if you can catch something moving, but once again, though, if something's moving, and this is where my HVAC background comes into, is the infiltration, which is air getting into the house because there's cavities in the house, depending on what kind of insulation you have. And a lot of these old locations that are claimed to be haunted have crappy insulation and have lots of holes where mice and other rodents and other bugs can get in. So there's definitely air movement. So if it's definitely a malleable object that is light in volume, then it's going to move by air, and you'd be shocked how it's possible, but it is. Like I said, I'm an HVAC guy. It's crazy how much little air can move something.
I want to bring it back around again to belief systems, particularly like religious, cultural, and personal. How do you see that affecting the paranormal cases that you've been on?
Well, back again to well, for one, films like The Exorcist and Paranormal Activity didn't just entertain us; they legit changed how people think about the paranormal. Suddenly exorcisms or shadow figures weren't just religious or local folklore; they became part of mainstream culture, right? But culture also feeds on history. You have stories of the Loudun possession, which is a bunch of nuns in France being possessed, supposedly, or even like back to the Salem witch trials, which are centuries old. They still echo today in our understanding of evil and hysteria. So the paranormal is a dialogue between lived experience and the stories we tell about them, and so that's why it resonates, because the more media or pop culture is made about it, we start to gravitate towards these things. I can't tell you how many times that I go to haunted places, I hear stories about what's here, what people experienced. I remember you being on Tim Shaw's episode about this creation of the story that didn't really truly happen, right?
Right.
I also and Frankie, who's the Parasite Project in this, anomalistic psychology, which is to prove the natural occurrences in the paranormal. But there's also paranormal psychology, which is known as parapsychology, which tries to understand the paranormal through the paranormal means. But Something I truly love to harp on to is projection. It's a metaphysical term, not the technological term, but of artificial intelligence, or what people would call a tulper, egregore, poltergeist. I think that also we are given these historical lessons of haunted history that might be fabricated or, of course, twisted a little bit. We get these things, and I think over enough time that these people go there, even though there might not be any historical evidence. Something I write in my book is about Chloe at the Myrtle's mansion. Chloe never
Yes.
Myrtle's plantation. Chloe
Yes.
never existed, but
No
people
shit.
but Chloe has been talked to, supposedly, people on recorders or video.
Do you
So
know? Do you
so I
know?
believe in that.
I have a couple photos of a statue that used to be in that where that image of Chloe is. I did
Yep.
a video on this actually to
Oh, did
debunk
you?
them. Yeah, if you look on YouTube. But there's this giant statue that's hidden back in the woods.
Hmm.
That statue used to sit in that breezeway, and of course you have those lights. That's what casts that shadow. It's the same exact shape of what Chloe is.
Really?
Yep. So that is, yeah, in my mind, that's 100% debunked. With
It is, and I really truly believe in projection, right? You could say it's something that you create, and then can also be a collective creation that can interact with people. I do believe in that kind of in some form. I can't prove it; it's not empirical or fact, but it's fascinating because I've done my own personal studies where I put somebody in a house. Evil study, actually. It's kind of reminds me of some of the most unethical psychology studies, like the Stanford prison experiment. But
mm,
I did put somebody in a house that they had a connection to. Nothing ever happened. They built a house, and I made them believe that something was going on in that house to give them comfort. And then eventually stuff actually started happening over a period of time. So is it something we created, or is it because we told ourselves that something would happen over time, or we tricked ourselves out we thought things were happening? And that's the awesome thing, is I think a lot of what we deal with in the paranormal is a projection, but also too, and I ain't cutting out the natural explanations of it. I do love things like the stone tape theory, that emotions and trauma can be imprinted into certain environments and certain properties, and people leave echoes of themselves. I find it kind of crazy if we do the same thing over and over every day, that we're not going to leave an imprint of that activity. We're basically walking recorders or walking receivers. Like I said, we send out electric signals. We have this biofield around us that is, not proven, but really lean towards to being a great theory, that we have this biofield around us. So maybe we let traces of our biofield around, and these echoes happen. I believe, and I know a lot of people that talk about Lizzie Borden. I work in Fall River every day. Actually, my company used to service the Borden house, but I've also been in Maplecroft, which was her adult home after everything happened. And I've heard many people say that the Lizzie that they tend to deal with at Maplecroft is much different than what they would deal at Lizzie's house, because the one at Lizzie's house is more chaotic and negative, while the one at Maplecroft is more peaceful and forthcoming. And that would understand that the what happened at that house in Fall River compared to Maplecroft, why the energies would be different, if there is a natural explanation to it, or stone tape theory, that trauma, that grief, all those emotions that were put into that moment of those people dying, her family dying, probably permeated into the ground, and that echo happens. There's so many different awesome theories and fascinating things that people have implemented or talked about or present about the paranormal field. And I think that's why, like I said, this book, or what this topic, isn't necessarily to say the paranormal doesn't exist. It's to say that the mystery is real, but how much of it is mystery, and how much of it is us? And it's a
our
paradox.
own energy, our
It's
own
a
energies.
Yeah, it's a paradox, right? I don't think we'll ever get to know, unless neuroscience becomes very evolved in the next 10, 20 years, which it has already since its early conception. Neuroscience ain't that old in regards to science. So there is a great chance that over time that we might find things that don't exist. And that's why I like to say now I'm agnostic theist, like I'm a believer, but I'm also and that revolves around the paranormal too. One day I can find out everything that I thought to be true could be proven wrong, and I wouldn't be upset about it. I'd have to digest it and accept
Mhm.
it. Like, think
But
about it, right?
you know,
Sorry.
that's kind of the point of this field, though. Nobody is an expert in it, and
Yeah,
it's kind of we learn something. It might make sense
yeah,
today, right? What we
yeah,
know, but we're going to learn something tomorrow that might change that.
yeah.
It's a
Like,
given.
yeah, like with my field of demonology, right? If you look at demonology, which became really a practical study from academia because it was an academic study for a long period of time, and then during the Inquisition, it became practical, right? People applied it to in court cases or condemnation of people. And the thing about demonology, right, is that a lot of possession thought, right, of people being possessed now we know is schizophrenia or psychosis or bipolar or epilepsy or other neurological disorders or psychological disorders. Now we know that, but back then it was the demon. It was possession, right? So we have come a long way, and people died for this belief. People were stoned, hung, tortured. Look at Mercy Brown, which is the OG vampire story in America outside of Romania. Me and you've been to Romania, so we know
Yeah.
about vampire lore, or the Strigoi, as they call it there. But Mercy Brown, like she had tuberculosis, but they condemned that poor woman for a
Mhm.
long time, and they buried her grave up and did and
Well, that
Tillenhouse
goes
and
back
all
to
those
that
people.
hysteria thing where they didn't understand. See, I follow the medical world with
Yeah,
this kind of stuff,
yeah,
and because I'm from a medical background.
yeah,
But when you look at stories like that, and you look at, for instance, Huska Castle, the story behind that was the well actually had something that was some kind of bacteria that was killing everybody. I forget. I
yeah,
think it was cholera or something like that. But they built the castle to keep the demons in because they knew it was something coming out of the water. They blamed demons
yeah.
for it 'cause they had no other way to say what it was. They just knew something was coming out of the well and killing everyone. But they didn't know the concept of germs or anything. So what do you do? Let's call it demons. Let's build a castle around there to keep those demons in. And that's what happened.
And that's why famine and other things in early ancient times. That's why it was led to be believed demons or gods or
Mhm.
goddesses to do those things because that was the easiest interpretation to them. To because they didn't know physiological ramifications or physiological disorders or things that could impact people. As humans, we've kind of been led to learn it as it comes. How many times we've probably been told not to eat a certain berry in the forest because probably somebody ate that berry and probably died or had really bad crap. So we learn as we go, and that's the thing is that the thing about this book or this realm of the psychological dimensions of the paranormal is that it's a realm that we have to. Not everybody. I'm not telling everybody to go get your psychology degree, but it's great to understand the basis of it, especially for those people that go deal with people in their homes. Understand the words that you say that might impact them wrongfully.
Absolutely.
um, Understand the cause and effect. Understand what needs to be done besides just doing a ritual, which I do feel like helps. And what extra reinforcement can you give them? Like I said, I if somebody, and for me, for my casework, if somebody claims that they're possessed, I will not touch them. I will talk to them and go back and forth, give my question, but I will not touch them. If they say that they are possessed, which most people that are truly possessed don't know that they're possessed, is that if they say they're possessed, I ask them to go get a psychological evaluation. If they don't get it, I'm sorry, I can't help you because you're not willing to help yourself. Because I need to know what could be ticked off that box that I also have to tackle or they have to tackle to also help you get over this hurdle. Because, like I said earlier in the show, I could rid you of your demons. I could rid you of your spirits. And a lot of it's them. I'm the tool. I'm the crutch to get them over that line. But if they're not fully willing to divest their time into it, my time and effort isn't going to be meaningful because I'm just a mediator. They're the ones that have to, at the end of the day, do the work. It's their life. I don't set their goals for them. They set the goals for themselves. And that's a psychology thing as well, right? Yeah,
Right.
setting goals, managing your behaviors, changing your life, putting yourself in a new direction. And it's a very important part of the paranormal, regardless at the end of the day if it's real or not. And that's what I'm not trying to say. I'm not trying to disprove it or prove it. I'm just trying to walk a narrow bridge here, saying, hey, it needs to be implemented in some form or fashion. And it's an interesting route to go down. And if you do go down it, it's going to be a deep dark hole, just like the paranormal is, because psychology is diverse. There's many different theories and opinions in it. Some that are maybe lean towards fact. Some that leads towards anecdotal evidence, or anecdotal in the sense of philosophical thought, like Freud or Jung, right? So, but even a lot of their thought patterns are now being emulated in today in some form of fashion, like collective unconsciousness now has some correlation to genetic memory. So a lot of those things are interesting, like archetypes, right? With Jungian theory, that's a fascinating thing and has a lot of segue into the paranormal, or synchronicities, right? Why we think that we might see something and then we see it, you know? So it's all fascinating. And to me, we are paranormal, right? The human mind is paranormal. It is unknown. It still hasn't been fully learned. There's still so many things that we do not know about our DNA that we learn every day. So, like the gland I said with the third eye, we thought that was a dead gland until the 50s and still didn't understand until much
I
later.
still relate it to the DMT. Who's the guy that said tune in? You know where I'm going, the LSD guy.
Oh, Crowley?
No, no,
Oh,
no. His name
what?
was the 60s guy. I think his
Oh,
name
yeah.
was Larry or something. He was a psychologist from Stanford that he believed in LSD, using that as a method to get past the ego and attune yourself to the other world. But he's famous for going into one of those rallies and saying tune in. I forget what he said, something about tune in, turn off, and drop out, or something like that.
Well,
He's famous
the
for it.
funny thing about that is too is it was a Joe Rogan thing, yeah, for people that actually know what I'm talking about, but it actually is a theory, it's called the stoned ape theory, right? Where we grew up in the fields of Africa, and I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying it's a theory that where we grew up in the fields of Africa, psilocybin is actually quite well plenishable there, right? Which is a mushroom, which gives you an elusive psychedelic state. And stoned ape theory states that the psilocybin in the fields is what helped uh, kind of fire off our neurotransmitters and our synapses to actually develop our brain to the intellectual ability of evolution we are now. You take it with a grain of salt, but it's interesting. Like, look at, like, talking about Crowley. Look at what Crowley did with his followers. They took LSD and other drugs to come one with
Mhm.
themselves, to talk to dark entities, right? So
Right.
it's been a common place to use psychedelics as a means of a spiritual tool to talk to the other side. So it's fascinating in that sense. And on top of it, yeah, a great show. Well, I shouldn't say great show because the third season kind of sucked, but the first season, and the person that consulted on that was Ralph Sarchi, a demonologist, or if you might know him, for people that are listening, as the guy made the movie about Deliver Us from Evil and with Eric Bana. But in the show Evil, the seminarian that's becoming a priest, who is the quote unquote demonologist, he does psychedelics to talk to God. So that's been an observable thing. You look at Native American culture, peyote, and other cacti that have psychedelic properties. They did that to speak to the spiritual realm or become one with nature. So
You-
it's fascinating.
James, we are just out of time. I'm going to have you back on for a show just on that, though.
Okay. Okay.
There's a lot to say about that. I mean, that could be an entire show on its own. But where can people look for your new book?
Yeah, so if it's published, it'll be through the publisher or through the other means. But if it's self-published, it'll be on Amazon. But I will be making an announcement tomorrow after because it is late and to coincide with this show. But as soon as it comes out, it'll be plastered over Facebook, social media, on my website, which is either jamesannitto.com, which is my name. If you're listening on FM, it's JAMESANNITTO.com, or if easier enough, www.demonology.org.
Well, James, thank you so much for taking the time to come back on the show to see me.
Thank you so much for having me, and it was such a pleasure to announce my book on here, and I can't wait to be on again.
Yes, I'm definitely going to have you back on. You've been listening to The Gateway, broadcast from the edge of the Mojave where the strange slips through the cracks, live from United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM New Orleans. My guest tonight was demonologist and paranormal investigator James Annitto, as he shares his insight on the psychological dimensions of the paranormal. If you've missed any part of the show, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel to catch the replay and stay up to date on all my latest radio interviews and paranormal adventures. That's where I house everything, is on YouTube. You can find a link through my website at clthomas.org. Thank you all for listening, and until next time.
Are you ready to explore the unknown? Dive into the world of the strange, mysterious, and unexplained with Eerie Expeditions magazine. Each issue is packed with spine-tingling tales, cutting-edge paranormal investigations, and exclusive insights into hauntings, cryptids, UFOs, and more. Whether you're a seasoned investigator or just love a good ghost story, Eerie Expeditions magazine has something for you. Join our growing community of truth seekers and adventure lovers. Subscribe today at EerieExpeditionsMagazine.com and unlock the secrets of the supernatural. Are you ready? That's EerieExpeditionsMagazine.com, where the extraordinary is just a click away. Dare to discover.